Who doesn't love a good villain? The evil overlords, the mad scientists, the monsters, we've seen them all, and they each have their roles to play. But what if the villain isn't just the villain in this story? What if he's the one writing it? In Wuthering Waves, one of the biggest threats is someone who doesn't need brute strength or a legion of armies to throw everything into chaos. All he needs is a script, and a few actors willing to play their parts. When we first meet Cristoforo in the story, it's like he appears out of nowhere, standing out as a bright red spot in a sea of muted colors. He introduces himself as a modest playwright, as if that's all there is to him. Looking back on it now, the fact that he's dressed in crimson red from head to toe should have been enough to tell me that he was a red flag from the start. But you can't blame me. When he tells us that he's simply looking for some inspiration for his story, I took his words at face value, assuming he's just another NPC we'll soon forget about. And boy, was I ever wrong. Just like the rover, he's quietly watching a curious scene unfold before him, where people belonging to the Order of the Deep, a faction in Raguna that worships the Sentinel and claims to act as their representative, usher citizens to set sail on a sacred pilgrimage. The rover can immediately tell that something isn't right, but just before they can interfere, Cristoforo stops them, telling the rover that they shouldn't get involved. When the rover speaks to him about the pilgrimage, he confirms that the sacred journey is not so sacred at all, because the pilgrims are seen as nothing more than fools in the eyes of the Order. His words have a rhythm to them that's fitting for a playwright, setting up this whole situation like it's some fanatical drama waiting to unfold. He even asks the rover what they think the ending should be like, which is a bit odd, but it's hard to be suspicious of someone so charismatic and theatrical, especially when they like to speak in metaphors that obscure what they truly mean. So far, he's done a pretty good job of framing his role as a helpful guide who's more interested in writing his plays than worrying about anything else. But everything that happened here is just to set the stage. His opening act, he's hiding his teeth behind a poet's smile, making it the perfect cover-up for the tragedy he wants to weave. So I was gullible enough to fall for his silly act in the beginning. His introduction and subsequent scenes in the 2.0 main story made me believe that he was just there to conveniently drop important bits of lore, and then we were never gonna see him again. But I should have known better. Cristoforo is always at the right place at the right time, showing up whenever the rover needs specific information that will nudge them in the right direction. His timing is almost unnerving too, like he's either following the rover around or he knows where the rover is headed at any point in time. Just like a director who isn't just aware of the cast, but the stage directions too. This paints a picture of a much more dangerous and calculated person, something that will be proven even further when we see him talking to Frolova at the very end of the 2.0 main story. Frolova is a known member of the Fraxidus, another faction that is one of the game's main antagonistic forces, so this tells us everything we need to know about where Cristoforo's loyalties lie. This scene also confirms that everything that's been going on so far is all part of Cristoforo's carefully crafted script. You can even liken his initial appearance to a Greek chorus. In many Greek plays, they provide insight into the plot, but while a Greek chorus is often a background presence, Cristoforo's manner of dress serves as a contrast to that, hinting that there's more to him than meets the eye. Think of it this way, he's pointed out that the curtains are blue and told us the reason why, but is that really the case? Is there more to it, or are the curtains just blue? The only one who knows the answer is Cristoforo himself. It should have been obvious because this is the face of a man who's always plotting behind our backs and takes great pleasure in it, but I was swayed by his charms, his poetic swagger. But even though we know now that Cristoforo is the one driving the plot beats all along, that doesn't mean his Modest Playwright facade is a complete lie. If anything, it's a brilliant way to foreshadow what we can expect from him. His passion for storytelling is infused in everything he says and does. He's constantly drawing metaphors between life and theater, blurring the line between reality and fiction. Another interesting thing about Cristoforo is while Frolova speaks of faith like it's set in stone, a symphony where everyone has a part to play, whether they like it or not, Cristoforo doesn't see it that way. He sees the world as a huge stage where everyone is an actor driven by their own will. He goes on to say that he just puts the characters on the stage, but it's all up to them how they want the story to unfold, as if he's just an outsider who is completely detached from everything, even though he can be the very reason why some of these actors might die. I believe he just loves watching people struggle and triumph against all odds. He's like a connoisseur who is delighted by the human spirit when it's at its lowest, fascinated by how stubborn and passionate someone can be when they want something badly enough. Which, in my opinion, makes him pretty terrifying. Because as much as he admires the heroes he'd chosen for his grand tragedies, he doesn't sound like someone who cares all that much about their well-being. If anything, he cares more about the quality of the performance than whether or not his actors will be alive by the end of his plays. It doesn't even matter to him if things don't play out exactly the way he wants them to. To Cristoforo, there's no greater pleasure than letting his hero shine, because in the end, he's content to watch as things unfold, while his chosen actors remain the stars of the show, regardless of whether they succeed or fail. But it's not as if Cristoforo is always just sitting on the sidelines as things fall into place. While in version 2.0, his actions are more subtle, especially considering one of the interactions she could have had with him is optional, he begins taking on a more active role in the Your Summer Will Never Wither event in version 2.3. While the Rover is enjoying a meal with Carlotta, they overhear street artists talking about the Golden Anthem poets, and about how their last manuscript has been found by the Order's acolytes. The poets were considered to be the most devout believers of the Sentinel, but they were banished because they insulted the divinity, which is always a big no-no in the eyes of the Order. And then, all of a sudden, there's Cristoforo using his powers to possess the plushies. Neither the Rover nor Carlotta realize that Cristoforo is behind this, giving him the perfect opportunity to insert himself into the situation by explaining what just happened. He tells them that an article suggests that the plushies are possessed by daemons, and that the Golden Anthem poets are to blame. And coincidentally enough, he happens to have a copy of the poet's last work, which he then shares with the Rover before leaving them to puzzle the pieces together. This is Cristoforo reassuming his role as someone who just wants to help, even though we, the players, already know that he probably isn't doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He's done this exact thing with the poets themselves too. They were faithful to the Sentinel, maybe too faithful, so when Cristoforo gave them the truth about the Sentinel, that the Order had everyone worshipping a false god, they immediately tried to unravel the lie by exposing it. But why does he go out of his way to share the truth like this? Maybe there's poetic justice in witnessing the most devout believers from the Order get exiled because of blasphemy. But really, Cristoforo just wants to see what trapped birds in a gilded cage will do once the gate is left wide open. Will they choose to fly, or will they fall to their deaths? This is a philosophical debate that Cristoforo appears to be obsessed with, because it's a recurring theme with every stage he sets. He pushes other characters to act, setting them up in situations that will make them question their choices and their beliefs, just to see what happens next. He doesn't expose the Sentinel's reality out of compassion or justice, but because he wants to inject chaos into a system that's already barely holding itself together, so he can watch how people will handle the fallout. But while it may seem that he's only fascinated by tragedies and drama, Cristoforo also enjoys it when his actors rise above the challenges he'd put in place. After all, he doesn't seem all that upset when Shakona chooses to reveal the truth about the Golden Anthem's past, instead of falling into complete despair even when he tries to mess with her head. But even still, Cristoforo doesn't let us forget that he's a villain in this story. Sure, he's shared the truth more often than not, but there's always a reason for his every move, and the perception of that truth might just be the key to his whole deal. Just a small disclaimer, this section will be going into speculation territory more than the others in this video, because despite finally seeing his forte in action, we don't have a lot of evidence on how it works exactly, but let's start with what we do know. In Solaris 3, everything is made up of frequencies. Matter, information, energy, and even events of the past have a vibrational presence, or Wuthering Waves that can be amplified or corrupted. Cristoforo's forte likely allows him to manipulate these frequencies through his stories, and by doing so, he can create false realities, or sonorospheres based on the scripts he has written. His power can potentially overwrite the real world if the right conditions are met, often requiring some type of battery or anchor to feed the sonorosphere. However, that isn't the only condition required for his powers to work. At first, I thought he just needed a source, whether it be actual historic events or even manuscripts like the Golden Anthem's poem, because they already exist as strong imprints of frequencies in the world. But the more I thought about it, I started to wonder, what if all he needs for his powers to work is to have people's perception of things be a certain way? He still needs a source, obviously, but what if the rest of it just involves making people believe that a certain interpretation or frequency of the source is true to succeed in messing with reality? For example, it's the Primus Fenrico who uses the Golden Anthem's legacy to spread fear and resentment across Ragusa, and when people start believing that their poem is cursed, Cristoforo can then twist their words' meaning into something that it isn't, allowing him to summon daemons in Ragusa. Think of it like a messed up feedback loop. Cristoforo doesn't directly fabricate lies, he distorts the frequency or the perception of it into whatever he wants it to be, just like how warped music can sound very differently even if the chords are the same. The poem isn't cursed to begin with, but if the public believes it is, then Cristoforo can weaponize that belief to adjust the poem's frequencies, allowing him to summon actual demonic manifestations. Maybe this is why he likes to share the truth himself, because he can then shape people's perception into whatever he wants, and use that against them. In a 2.4 main story, this becomes a lot more complicated, if only because the scale of what Cristoforo is trying to accomplish is much larger, but the base concept is mostly the same. Much like with the Golden Anthem's poem, Cristoforo has a source for his forte to use as its foundation, and this time, it happens to be the tragic story of a gladiator named Mia. Mia was a gladiator who was often ridiculed because of her weak abilities and mental struggles. She was also one of the Threnodians' failed resonators, and despite their attempts to corrupt her, Mia chose to take her own life rather than become a puppet for them. However, before that happened, Mia managed to win the Bloody Aegon, the Battle Royale version of the great Aegon we know today. Her victory is important here, because this is what Cristoforo uses as a fictitious anchor to craft a play that will overwrite reality with the ending the Threnodian wants to see, the coming of the Dark Tide over Septimont. However, since the protagonist of this play, Mia, is dead, there's no way for Cristoforo to complete the story with Mia triggering the Dark Tide. So what does he do? He recasts the role. He gives it to someone who parallels Mia in more ways than one. He writes a play with this new champion as the protagonist, so he can swap them out later once he wants to overlay the bad ending onto reality. This is where Lupa comes in, and where I'm probably going to sound like someone with a conspiracy board, but analyzing the media we consume is half the fun, right? From what we see in the 2.4 main story, it's clear that Cristoforo is trying to reshape the narrative of Mia's life by overlapping it with Lupa's. This is easy for him to do because Lupa is practically the same character archetype as Mia, so the frequencies of their memories and stories are likely very similar. Lupa is a celebrated gladiator who's also under the constant pressure of public perception and fear of failure. Lupa greatly admires Mia, and likely has learned a thing or two from watching Mia's old footage. And finally, Lupa also wins the Great Aegon by herself just like Mia did many years ago. Once the frequencies of Mia's past match Lupa's present situation, it's there that her memories become a blur, as if she's under someone's control. This is the moment Cristoforo can begin reshaping the sonorosphere around her, because she is now the protagonist of Cristoforo's script. Lupa ends up fulfilling the task the Threnodian originally wanted to use Mia for, which is seeking out the central hub. Once Lupa destroys it, the Dark Tide descends upon Septimont, and then the loop of stories begin. With every reset, Lupa loses more of herself to the point where she can no longer remember her name or her memories, most likely because her frequencies have been overwritten. This makes her into a blank slate, allowing Cristoforo to replace her identity with Mia's as the harbinger of the Dark Tide. And since Lupa's role now belongs to Mia, the world around her will start to perceive her as Mia. It's likely why we kept seeing Lupa overlapping with Mia's image throughout the story. To the people of Septimont, in that sonorosphere at least, Lupa and Mia are one and the same. This makes Cristoforo's forte all the more terrifying, because this is how he warps reality. He doesn't change what people see, but he manipulates how frequencies are perceived through his scripts. It doesn't matter whether the story is true or accurate, he just needs people to believe in the version he's written. Once they do, then fiction becomes the truth. His story becomes the new reality. By the time Carthathia and the Rover step in, Cristoforo's story is dangerously close to completion. The sonorosphere he's created is the stage for his tragic story, rehearsing his script over and over again until he's ready to unleash the worst ending possible. Luckily, it's not the outcome we got. Still, it's scary to think about just how close he was to achieving this ending, but just like every writer out there who faces a roadblock, Cristoforo can always go back to the drawing board. Failure isn't the end for him after all. It's just another draft, another revision. As long as he has a source, a stage, and an audience willing to believe, Cristoforo can keep writing a story until the version he wants is finally well received. Cristoforo has become one of the most fascinating characters in Wuthering Waves, at least for me. He's a walking commentary on storytelling itself, a villain who can weaponize the narrative frequency of any script he writes. Everything he's done in the story is a whole other level of manipulation, because he's not just stringing the rover along, but we, the players, as well, considering it's hard to tell whether or not we can trust what he says most of the time. He forces us to ask the question, are we the heroes of our own story, or are we just actors in his? So what's next for him? He's probably already in the middle of writing his next play. His failure in Septimont is still a victory by itself, because now he knows that the rover will make for a great protagonist, no matter what story he writes. If anything, he just has to account for the rover's tendency to break the script and tweak the narrative accordingly. After all, every great playwright learns from their harshest critics. But someday, his story will reach its final act, and Cristoforo will have the chance to step forward for his curtain call. Whether or not he's deserving of our applause, I'll leave it to you to decide. Let me know in the comments if you love the guy as much as I do, or if you have any cool theories about him. Thanks for watching.